Thanks, Emily. And thanks, everybody at the gallery, too. All the staff, everybody has been really amazing. And yeah, my experience so far has been great, and I'm really happy to be here. I have a selection of works. Basically, since my thesis work, I graduated from NASCAD in 2011. So I selected a few installations to show you guys. Like Emily mentioned, I was born and raised in Costa Rica, and that usually influences quite a bit the things that I do. I basically lived half my life in Costa Rica and half my life in Canada. I'm also really happy to have like more of an informal kind of dialogue conversation. So if you guys want to ask me anything during the presentation, just by all means, feel free to raise your hands and we can talk about it instead of me rambling for an hour. Normally, I have in the past, I've usually done very scripted kind of like notes and things that I wanted to say. And then, I don't know, usually because it makes me feel safe for doing these things this way. But since the past year or so, I've actually have not made any notes for my presentations, and I just trying to be, thinking on my feet while I'm doing them. So hopefully this is going to be like a good experience for you guys and for myself as well. So I think I'm going to start with, like I mentioned, I made a selection of a few installations since 2011. I normally present my work from the last thing that I've done, kind of going back in time. And then I was thinking that, yeah, that's kind of like an odd way of going about it. So I kind of changed things, and then I'm going back to 2011 and then kind of moving forward in time. So hopefully you can see a kind of progression or a kind of linear kind of development that somehow makes sense as to what led me to what I'm presenting in the gallery tomorrow. This book was kind of really amazing for me. It's one of my favorite writers, Alberto Manguel. He's from Argentina. He immigrated in Canada in the 80s. He used to have a radio show on CBC. And he wrote a really incredible book called The Library at Night, which he tells the story of a library of his that at night all the books kind of talk to each other and they come alive. And so I came across this book that he co-wrote with Gianni Guadalupe. And it's basically what the title says, the Dictionary of Imaginary Places. So there's thousands of entries of all these places, costumes, you name it, from fiction. And it's like an encyclopedia of imaginary places and things. So on the left is from Robinson Crusoe's Island. And I selected that example specifically. It's going to come up again, and I'll tell you guys why. So this was when I was doing my thesis work at NASCAD. It kind of started a little bit before when I was in Glasgow, but I had this subject map with all the kinds of, kinds of things that you work, that you have around when you're working on your thesis. It's hundreds, well, maybe not hundreds, but lots of different references and books and things that I wanted to organize somehow on paper for my thesis exhibition. And then I had one of those subject maps with all the bubbles and making links between things. And then I started thinking, well, what if I can make an actual map of all this information? So I'm going to try to do this as graciously as I can, but I'm going to switch. Because I have it as a PDF because it's a little bit easier to see. So I started thinking, what if I turn all this information that I have into an actual map with provinces and valleys and cities, and what idea could be a city, or what kind of idea would be a river, or what kind of idea would be a mountain, and how can I make all those decisions without not being necessarily arbitrary, but what if this idea, it is a bridge between two places? What if this idea is a port, for example? So then I worked on this map for, let me try to zoom in on this, for quite a while. And it's called the Empire of Language as a Place of Struggle. And it's basically divided into 4 provinces. So it's the province of system, the province of representation, the province of violence, and the province of things. Most of the work that I ended up doing during that 1 year came out of this province, the province of things, specifically around City of Place, which is a library. And these are some of the authors and references that I was interested in. And there's references to literature, but also poetry and music and art historical movements. And basically everything that I had, I was trying to draw connections between all these very disparate things and making sense of how to link an art historical movement with a novel, or how to link this to something else. And I was thinking that this could be, it could be like a roadmap to navigate an exhibition, but it could also be a way of making an exhibition. So for the, more or less for like the 1 year that I worked on this map, my work was kind of like like a journey through this map. And as I would make the journey, then work would be generated and work would be created. So I'm gonna show you guys, I guess I should also say the map, the exhibition that I was interested in was about the library. It was an exhibition about about thinking the idea of the library as not only a place, but also as an idea, as a place that classifies knowledge. And then I was doing it for my thesis exhibition, but I was also doing it for this gallery in Barrie, Ontario, that is called it's called the McLaren Art Center, which is down here. And then they had they received a scholarship at one point because they used to be a library. They received a Carnegie scholarship, so they turned the former library into a gallery. So every year they celebrate their history as a former library, so they do exhibitions that have to do with libraries or language or that kind of stuff. So they invited me to do an exhibition there, so then I was working towards that as well. Let me just go back to the PowerPoint. One of the first things that I did for that exhibition, it was this video called Disruptions. And this part I did in Glasgow, and then at Glasgow University, the library over there is like 9 floors of a library, and it's open 24 hours. It's an incredible, wonderful place that you can basically go in with a camera and nobody would really ask you any questions. So I didn't get permission to do it. I just kind of like went in on a Sunday at 2 a.m. and then I started shooting and reshelving books. So then I started moving books from one section to another. So I was moving books from, say, fiction to history, reorganizing books by color, and that was the first sort of piece out of that body of work. So I'm going to show you guys. The video is fairly long. It's about 14 minutes long, but I have an excerpt that is about 5 minutes. So I'll show you guys that first.
LD58C9, LD57, LD56, LD56 Defoe's fiction, Defoe's perpetual seekers, LD54, LD54M6, LD54P6, LD53, LD Letters of Death.
The methodical task of writing distracts me from the present state of men. The certitude that everything has been written negates us or turns us into phantoms. I know of districts in which the young men prostrate themselves before books and kiss their pages in a barbarous manner, but they do not know how to decipher a single letter. Epidemics, heretical conflicts, peregrinations which inevitably degenerate into banditry have decimated the population. I believe I have mentioned suicides, more and more frequent with the years. Perhaps my old age and fearfulness deceive me, but I suspect that the human species, the unique species, is about to be extinguished, but the library will endure, illuminated, solitary, infinite, perfectly motionless, equipped with precious volumes, useless, incorruptible, secret. I have just written the word infinite. I have not interpolated this adjective out of rhetorical habit. I said that it is not illogical to think that the world is infinite. Those who judge it to be limited postulate that in remote places the corridors and stairways and hexagons can conceivably come to an end, which is absurd. Those who imagine it to be without limit forget that the possible number of books does have such a limit. I venture to suggest the solution to the ancient problem. The library is unlimited and cyclical. If an eternal traveler were to cross it in any direction, after centuries he would see that the same volumes were repeated in the same disorder, which thus repeated would be an order, the order. My solitude is gladdened by this elegant hope.
Okay, I'm going to stop it there because I need to keep an eye on time. But the video goes on and on. It's like about 14 minutes long. And it's a series of disruptions. It's a series of like reclassifications or proposals to the library. So I'm moving books from one section to another. Some of the actions are more charged or more political in a sense, like moving Robinson Crusoe from fiction to the section of history of Great Britain. Is a somewhat political gesture. Some of the other actions were more arbitrary, I guess, or more aesthetic, like reshelving of the books by yellow. But I was interested in those things. I was interested in the differences between those things. Like, I was reading a lot about the Dewey Decimal System and how, some of the decisions that he made as to what is considered science and what is considered literature, they're ultimately arbitrary. They're just based on somebody's classification of knowledge as good as anything else. So my classification of knowledge by color of the books is just as valid. So that was kind of like one of the thesis that I had behind the show or behind the work. Yeah, so, and then the whole exhibition was about that. It was about kind of like rethinking the library and rethinking how you can classify things. So the sculpture on the left is called Little Fugue in G minor for piano. And it's like a proposal for a library stack, where you shelve the books, but the stack follows a musical score, the Little Fugue in G minor for piano by J.S. Bach. So each one of I came up with a system where like the pitch and the value of the note would determine the length and the height, and that's why it has that sort of like gradient kind of shape. So like if you know the score or if you know the system that I use, you can literally play the library stack in a way. So I was thinking, well, maybe you can classify books by something completely external, like a musical score, a musical notation. It's going to dictate what kind of books you can shelve on that shelf, because then it's determined by the book's height and thickness, rather than anything else. So this is at the McLaren Art Center. There were a series of photographs that I did as well. Kind of like same kind of idea behind the video, actions that I did in the library. So this is the Dalhousie Library in Halifax, and then I removed all the letter E's from the computers on the first floor. It's called Species, well, this series is called Species of Spaces, The Void, which is a reference to George Perec, who wrote this novel called A Void without the letter E. And the letter E in English or Spanish or French, I think, is the most used letter in the alphabet. So people couldn't search for any books with letter E for like a period of like a couple of hours. So I was thinking about kind of like doing anonymous kind of proposals to the librarians for reclassifying things. So like, this other one is called a sentence, and then I stack books so that the titles of the books, they form like a kind of poem or a sentence. So he reads reading between the lines, not only in stone, nor any country, here and now, orders in chaos, and then the truth, semiotics unfolding, for all we know, speaking, the conceptual basis of language. Language is a human problem, but even so, all is well, in transit, at the center, and peace never came, a writer at war. So I think there were about 4 like medium or like large kind of like photographs. They're like 4 feet by like 30 inches or something, plus this diptych in the back. And there was the video and then a few other sculptures. So yeah, the exhibition was also called Disruptions. And I think that's it. And this is moving on to something kind of like completely unrelated. And I often feel that I have like 2 fairly different and disparate bodies of work. One that I see more biographical in a sense, or more related to where I'm from, or to issues related to those ideas. Sometimes I worry that they're too different from each other, these two bodies of work, but nonetheless. This is called the Freedom Fighter Manual. And the Freedom Fighter Manual was an actual manual, and it was designed by the CIA in 1983. And they flew over Nicaragua, and they dropped thousands from planes. And it's basically like instructions for civil disobedience and revolt. So the idea behind it was that people would read the manual, and they would overthrow the government. So it was like a covert operation. This is the time of Ronald Reagan and the Contras. The manual didn't work. People didn't overthrow the government. It was like of interest to me because the government that they wanted to overthrow was like a fairly democratic government in Nicaragua at that point. they were instituting all these like very positive things, like they wanted mass literacy and gender equality, and they were expropriating lands from all these U.S. companies and giving it back to the people, and that was part of the reason why this kind of like happened. And there's obviously a long history of manipulation and influence of U.S. in Latin America. But anyways, I got a copy of the manual, and then I reproduced the manual with glow-in-the-dark ink. So when you walk into the room, I think that might be a little cropped. There's 17 pages on the book, and I silk screen each page with glow-in-the-dark ink. So when you walk into the room, I also installed motion sensor security lights. So when you walk into the room, the lights turn on, and the manual is basically invisible. If you don't move for about 5 to 7 seconds, then the sensors kind of switch off, and then the ink kind of comes on, and then you can read the manual. But the sensors were so sensitive that even if at times it happened that if you just blinked, then the lights would go back on, and then you couldn't read the manual. But definitely if you just move your head to try to read it better, or if you move your body, absolutely, then the manual goes away, and then you can't read it. So it's like this dynamic of like passivity and activity and action and inaction. What was interesting about it, his detail of the manual, to me, is that, I think like at an opening, which is like a fairly social kind of environment, it's like fairly frustrating for people, because you can, like if you're just by yourself in the gallery, then you can have like a lot of control over the manual, because you can't just stop moving and then read it. But when you have 20 people or 30 people, then it's kind of like politics, right? The greater the number of people, the harder it is to make a consensus for everybody to agree. So at openings, it's kind of impossible. Somebody walks in, somebody walks out, somebody moves. And people tend to, they organize themselves, but usually somebody kind of does something and then it goes away. So that's that installation. People often find it fairly frustrating, but I think it's kind of great that they do. This is another installation. This is from 2013. It's called Waiting for the Barbarians. And it was kind of like a study of certain aspects of globalization. It was kind of like it was more or less about three things for me. It was like a study of certain aspects of globalization. It was a reference to an art historical period, minimalism, and it was also based on a novel, Waiting for the Barbarians by J.M. Coetzee. And as disparate as those three things sound, like an art historical period, minimalism, and a novel, and certain ideas of globalization, I find ways in which all those things kind of like overlap, or I find like a common ground between them. And I think that's why I was showing the map at the beginning, because that's just usually the way that I think. I think very like tangentially, and then I tend to want to draw links between things. And usually that's why I make these installations. They're just they're like an exploration of, the overlaps between all these references, kind of like conceptual Venn diagrams, like, that kind of like the typical Venn diagram where you have two circles and that kind of overlap, that space that they overlap, that's where the installations happen, and those things that they have in common, in the tension between the different references. So I'm going to circle through this. There were a few kind of objects that I designed. All the objects I basically made. There was a T-shirt with a set of instructions for how to make a sculpture by holding your breath. There was a ruler made out of rubber where the unit of measurement was the length of my tongue. So it's this very impossible, absurd object. There was a humidifier and a dehumidifier that I cut and reassembled so that they form a perpetual absorb mechanism, like the dehumidifier, which is the taller one. It's extracting water from the air and dumping it into the tank, and the humidifier is taking that water and turning it into vapor and throwing it back into the atmosphere. So there's like perpetual, like very absurd mechanism. It's not doing anything other than like wasting energy probably. But it's called Lovers 2, Hunter and Kenmore, or a sculpture is made with 2 instruments, some supports, and pretty air. There was also a set of suitcases in the back. I don't know if you guys saw it, but they were like in the back to the right. And they had motion sensors. So if you approach them, they inflate and deflate as if they were breathing. The sensors are like this tiny little white dots here. Needless to say, people found them fairly unnerving. And there were a few photographs as well. This is called Lovers 1. And the series was called Realia series. Same Realia series, and this is called Measures of Distance, or there's 10 centimeters between your hands and mine. And this is another installation. It's called This Sleep Full of Folded Dreams. And it's kind of like see some of the aspects of these installations which are important, but for example, the fabric that is draped in there is fire-resistant fabric, and the kind of like what seems to be a flame is like a fake flame. It's done with silk and a fan and a light. So it was like real fire-resistant fabric, but a fake fire. The kind of like the metallic thing that is draping is a distortion mirror. The raven on top of the sculpture in the middle, which are IKEA coffee tables that got like reassembled, is an actual raven, but it was sitting on fake grapes. I think I have a video of it because there were like a few moving parts as well. So the tabletops from the coffee tables were spinning because one side is kind of like cardboard color, so they kind of like appear and disappeared. And there were fluorescent lights where they were pulsating as well. So there was like a lot of like cheap magic tricks in a way. Like it was like kind of like about perception and deception. Does anybody have any questions? Okay. Okay. This is from 2015. It's called Out of This Light into This Shadow. And then it's also kind of hard to see, but that lamp that hangs in the middle is a replica from a lamp from the Bauhaus by Wilhelm Wagner. It's a really interesting and beautiful lamp that I found at one point. And then I was interested when I was mentioning before in the tensions between all these different references. So for example, I was interested in how you can come into the space and then these shells, which are IKEA shells, they can appear like cheap minimalist sculpture, like a cheap Donald Judd or something. And then when you walk around, you realize that it's like an IKEA furniture. And again, also the Bauhaus lamp was like very important. The Bauhaus, I'm assuming all of you guys know the Bauhaus, but very important German school. What I'm interested in about them is that they were one of the first schools that really introduced design into everyday objects. Before them, a spoon was kind of like a spoon, and it was much more about function, but they really introduced aesthetics into everything. And it was like a fairly radical and revolutionary impulse behind it. They wanted to democratize design. They wanted to make, good-looking, interesting things for everybody. And that was kind of like the dream of the Bauhaus in a way. And then I was thinking, well, what if that dream of the Bauhaus actually became true, but it kind of became like a nightmare with IKEA, where you do have that kind of like mass design, but just kind of like cheap design in a way, like fast food design almost. So that was kind of like the reference in the title, out of this light into this shadow. There were a few collages that accompany the show. They were all done with IKEA catalogs. I think the only things that didn't come out of the catalogs is from the bigger collage, which is about 8 feet by 4 feet. So the bigger images didn't, but everything else, especially for the smaller ones, they didn't. And all these collages, they're pretty much, well, all the collages that I've done, actually with the exceptions on the ones in the other room, are cut by hand. So it's really hard to tell in these images, but they're like actual paper that I cut by hand and I glue. So these are some of the smaller ones. So the one on the right is called A Bedtime Story That Lasts the Entire Night, and on the left and on the right is Organic Minimalism. And even the titles, they came from the IKEA catalog magazines. Okay, this, obviously I didn't make it. Does everybody know this? Here in Amos Bosch, super famous Garden of Earthly Delights. So yeah, this giant triptych 3-panel painting that I was interested in at one point, that I made an exhibition that referenced that painting along with a few other things that I was interested in. This was at Gallery 44 in Toronto. And the idea was that when you would come into the gallery, it would be like an abstracted garden of sorts, where the delights would be objects that were presented to you. So even the color of the paint was important to me. Like the yellow paint is called Sun-Kissed Yellow, and the green paint is called Paradise Green. And like I mentioned, I was interested in ideas of commodity fetishism and ideas in commodities and objects. I was interested in that painting as well. I was interested in design. And I'm interested in how all those references, they kind of like slip between one another, and I can put them in tensions between each other. One of the things that I kind of like spend a lot of time thinking about, this installation was 2 rooms. So the other room, there's a video projection. Everything in the show was found. So all the objects were found. There's 3D printing sculptures that the objects were found online as well. And all the images in the collages were found, and then the actual size of the collage. So I kind of didn't make anything except for like had this logic of like resampling things or collaging things together. But one of the things that I spend quite a bit of time thinking about is how people navigate these installations. And I'm quite interested in like that first image when you come into a show, and what you see first and what you see second, and what's sort of like revealed to you at first and what's revealed, afterwards. And I usually tend to reward that curiosity. Like the more time that you want to spend with an exhibition, I want to reward that. So I leave kind of like more layers that you can look into something, or I leave details that you can discover. And I guess it's just my like a strategy for engaging audience that I have, and my own interest in like audience. And usually the way that I think about audience, like there's a does everybody know Lawrence Weiner? Yeah, very famous conceptual artist. He wrote the series of children's books at one point. He wrote several children's books, but there was one that is called Something to Put Something On. That is kind of like a really amazing play of sorts between two characters, character A and character B. And it's kind of like the way that I think about audience came up from reading this children's book by him. But anyways, the book goes, I think it's character A that starts, and he goes, I have a gift for you, to character B. And then character B goes, well, what is it? And then character A goes, it's on the table. And then character B goes, well, what's a table? And then character A goes, something to put something on. And then so on and so on. And they keep deconstructing what a table is and what a gift is. But that first impulse of, I have a gift for you, is the way that I try to think about, or even my approach to like color and layout. Like I want to present things that seem to you like I have a gift for you, that seem like you want to come in and spend time with it. Anyways, so there's a few details on this. This is one of the 3D sculptures that I told you guys about. Yeah, there's like, libraries of databases of virtual objects, like 3D objects that you can just download. And then if you have a 3D printer, you can print them on your own. So I use this software that allowed me to like mesh all these objects together and basically make like a 3D virtual collage and then have that printed. So these are printed in nylon. This really incredible company that I found in Toronto who has a partnership with Ryerson University. And they do a lot of like artist in residency programs and stuff. But usually when I think about these installations, like everything kind of like tends to play a role in it. Like even each one of the objects, like in the studio, I even have rows of objects. And then when I'm working on an installation, I put them on shelves, and then I kind of think of them as kind of auditioning to play the part, or to play the role in an installation, like auditioning in like a very literal sense. They want to play the part, and they are auditioning for me to be included in the show. So everything plays, the color of the paint plays a role. Every component and aspect in the show plays a role. The other big or like important component of that exhibition was this video that it was also done as a collage. Like I didn't shoot any of the footage in the video. It's all downloaded from YouTube. And I did a residency in the US when I was making this video, and I basically watched YouTube for like 8 or 9 hours a day, because it's like the kind of residency where they prepare your meals and then they do your laundry and you don't do anything. So it was like obviously incredibly privileged time, and then I just, because I couldn't bring my studio there and it had to be something that I could do on the moves, and then I thought, well, I'm just gonna make a video collage out of YouTube. So I was watching a lot of YouTube, which was not great after a couple of weeks, but I did end up making this video. Does everybody know what unboxing videos are? Yeah. So it's basically that. It's a video collage of unboxing videos. And that was in the other room. How do I play this?
Let's set that aside.
Yeah.
And take a look at this. So this is I think I know what this is. I've seen a few pictures. This is the magnetic charging case. And you can actually charge it right over here. So just to show you guys, let's see how this opens up. Yep, it's magnetic too. So here's it says watch edition. Really, really nice material. And let's see, what does it say here? Looks like it says anti-tarnish shipping filter, discard after unboxing. Okay. So, oh, and then we've got this thing, the charging thing too. So I'm gonna go ahead and, again, this is the 38mm one, not the 42. Okay. Let's go ahead and, my hands are like shaking, I can barely handle this. I feel like it's such a delicacy. Ah, okay. So it opens. Okay, okay. This looks good. Is there anything else here? Let's just take a look here. What does it say? It's really hard to see. The font is like super tiny, but it says 18 karat gold sapphire crystal ceramic back serial. Oh, then it shows you the serial information, I guess. Watch.
Hey y'all, Irix Guy here. Now today I want to do an unboxing of some Fruit of the Loom white briefs. Now these are a really good deal. You can find a link within this video's description where you can order them online. But if you want a high quality pair of underwear, you don't want to spend a lot of money, this is the way to do it. And so you get, in this, you get 7 pairs of these underwear. So look at that, how nicely packaged it is. Good construction there. Obviously they come in a variety of sizes. I wear a 36 because I like to eat a lot. What I do like about this underwear is that it's tag free, so there's no tag to rub against your rear end.
Can I just say, the most amazing thing about that guy, Rick, because he's like super famous now, is that it's like a legitimate interest in things. Like it's not parody or it's not irony. You know, he's like legitimately interested in showcasing these things to people. You know, so like he's stretching things, narrating things, but it's out of like a legitimate desire of sharing commodities with people, which I think, like to me, like I was trained as a sculptor, and the fact that people can have that deep relationship with material, that's what sculpture is. So it's just like, it's like, to me, it's fascinating. You know, it's like, it's, the first time that I read about unboxing videos, it was through this article in the New York Times. And to me, it just seemed like so striking that it was, in a way, a nutshell about commodity fetishism, but it was just such a sculptural investment. Anyways.
So just a really good, high quality pair of underwear. Good elastic right there. Like I said, the attention to detail is what matters, you know, and it's got a little fly right there in the front. Just good underwear.
This has been one that I've been super excited to get. They all have heat packs in them and cool packs, which is nice. Oh my goodness. This guy's like... So he is super cool. What I'm going to do is I'm going to let these guys sit at room temperature.
Alright, so this is the first thing that I pulled out of the box. Let's just see what's in here. Okay, so these right here must be those, the little cups, the lids for the cups that you can just put on them. And check that out, it actually says Ninja on it. You probably can't see that, but it does say Ninja. Alright, we got another box within this box. This is the other cup lid. And okay, so this just houses the cups themselves. Okay, so one of them is the 24-ounce cup, and then the other is the 18-ounce cup. So we got this here, and we've got this here. Ooh, and this also Houses the blade. Check that out. Let me just take this off. Yeah, that's the blade. Yeah, it looks like some pretty heavy duty stuff. You know, like, oh, this means business. Cool. So, and this has some weight to it. I like it. I like the fact that that has some weight. So there's the 2 cups. There's one lid. This is the other lid. There's the actual blade. And then inside of this other box, this is going to be the main base unit, because there's the power cord coming out of it right there. All right, so let's open this from the side, I guess. Yep. And Eureka! Yep, this is the base. Look at that. Okay. Well, definitely looks fancy. Now there it is. It says Ninja Professional on the front, along with 900 watts. And they really want you to know that. This is 900 watts, baby. Whatever that means. All right, so this is the moment of truth.
You can see here, nice leather, waxed laces. Kind of got that Louboutin feel with the spikes and also the brass balling there on the toe box. Very, very happy that I was able to get these. Like I said, during Black Friday, I went into the store. I wanted these. You can see there on the tongue. Canvas tongue with the gold imprint of Gucci. Nice wax laces. See the laces there? They are nice and waxed for you. Soft calfskin leather. This leather's super soft, as you could see.
The hands with the painted nails, kind of like green with the polka dots. She's from Brazil, and her channel is the second most popular channel on YouTube altogether out of all the channels. It's something, since I don't remember like the millions of views per month, but it's like something insane. Like imagine the second most popular channel on YouTube. So this phenomenon is like enormous. Like you can find unboxings, like you guys probably know, but out of everything from a $2 pen to like an $8,000 Gucci bag, and everything kind of like in between. And it's not like gender specific. You can find, dudes unboxing tools and like, and then there's like, it's really big for kids as well. Like there's a lot of unboxings that's specifically for kids. And that's actually the way that she started. She started unboxing like Disney toys and animated them in front of the camera. And then she became so popular that, companies have started like paying her money to like unbox their toys. And she's like a millionaire now and lives in New York City. But yeah, so all the footage was found on YouTube. And then kind of like my job was to, because it was broken into 4 screens, was to like choose the things that I wanted paired together, because there's only one voiceover in each one of the unboxings. So there's the blender and the Apple Watch. And I was interested in the language that they were using and how that language could be used to describe some of the other things that were being unboxed or unwrapped. So like the guy who's doing the Apple Watch, he talks about a delicacy, and at the same time the other guy's like opening the egg. And that kind of like a slippage between the organic and the inorganic, and the animate and the animate, and talking about things as if they were kind of like alive, and as if they were like living kind of like creatures, or a turtle, which you can like buy turtles through the post, which is kind of amazing to me. I was really interested in that. I was really interested in all those slippages and thinking about objects not as inanimate things, but on the contrary, things that are kind of like animated. And they're animated by, the market, they're animated by design, they're animated by advertising. So that was a lot about what the exhibition was trying to do, was trying to explore ideas of commodity fetishism, ideas of animism, of thinking of objects and things not as passive or inanimate things, but quite on the contrary, things with the will and things that have influence on us as much as we have influence on them. These are some of the collages. Again, they're cut by hand, and they're like 8 feet by 4 feet, so they're fairly large. They took about 3 to 4 months each one to make. There's like hundreds and hundreds of clippings. Even each one of the images, I had a laser. Yeah. Like even one of this tiny little figures could be made out of like 3 or 4 different images that were like cut by hand and glued together. So it's kind of like a labor of love in a way, which I will never do again because it was kind of like too much. That's a detail from that previous one. That's a detail of that one too. That was another one. And all the images, as I mentioned, were found in their original scale, so there isn't anything that I printed specifically or that I scanned and reprinted. So I really wanted to organize an installation or an exhibition with that methodology or with that kind of like logic behind it. And there were 3 collages, kind of like the 3 paintings in the Hiernamos Bosch, because it was like a triptych of these collages. That's the last one. And this is from earlier last year now, 2018. This is kind of like similar to that other body of work that I was talking about, the Freedom Fighter Manual. So that's when I see those kind of like bodies of work as a little bit different. One is a little bit more biographical. The other one is a little bit more related to my interest in design and my interest in objects. So this one, the plants, they're orchids. They're the national flower of Costa Rica. And this is in Calgary in the winter. And because they're orchids, most orchids don't grow in soil. They grow in rocks, or they have air roots, so they absorb the humidity through the air. And these are tropical rainforest orchids, so they need a lot of humidity. So I set them up in this kind of artificial ecosystem of sorts that I created between an industrial humidifier, which is the one in the middle, and then the dehumidifiers around them. So it's kind of like a metaphor for the region in a way, but the plants are like caught between these 2 external forces. One is like prompting it or like trying to like help it grow and develop and bloom, and the other force is keep extracting the humidity, so it's keeping the plant from developing and growing and blooming. And I think I have a quick video of how it works. The humidifier was like, it's an industrial humidifier for like a very large space. So it really, it literally changed the atmosphere in the gallery. And this is like, cold, was it in January or February? It was the dead of winter in Calgary, so it's like very dry, and as soon as you walk into the gallery, there's like this cloud of like humid air that came at you. The installation also involves the gallery in a way, like not only the infrastructure, because the plants, the only source of light for the plants is also the gallery lights, but it involves the staff because people need to like water the plants and maintain them. So I guess that's kind of like another reading that you can see on the piece. That space, this is Truck in Calgary. It has this giant industrial heater on the top as well, which is like has the sound, and it's kind of like quite present in the room as well. So I think it's usually important for me that things have like different layers and different readings and different entry points for different kinds of audiences. So somebody who might not know what that plant is or what it represents can read it in a different way. That is not only a reference to Costa Rica and the region. So another kind of like interpretation of it was that the orchids were kind of like a stand-in for the art object in a way. And then this kind of like very precarious system would parallel artist-run centers, which are usually in a very precarious situation that needs care and maintenance to support it, that involve very directly the people that work there. And then I had like very specific instructions for the watering, for the maintenance, and they had to like refill the humidifier and empty the dehumidifiers. So all that kind of like labor that went into them replicated that other labor metaphorically that goes into supporting an art project in an artist-run center. So yeah, so that kind of open-endedness or that kind of like flexibility is usually important in all the installations that I try to do. And I'm at the 47 mark, which is great. Yeah, you probably can't, because it really it really changes the atmosphere. Unless you can really contain it to that specific room, you can't really show it with works on paper or painting or anything that needs preservation, because it really does pump in a lot of humidity in the air. And the dehumidifiers are taking like a lot of water out of it, but it's still like it really changes the atmosphere. So I've only shown it once in Calgary, a truck, and I'm going to show it at Optica in Montreal in a week. But yeah, it's been kind of like an artist-run center project, and that's how the idea came about. At first, I did it for TPW, and it was actually in a group exhibition. But then it worked out that it was fine at that time. But it was a much smaller version. It was like small little humidifiers, the kind of like commercial ones that you buy, and it was only one dehumidifier, and there were only 3 plants. And the curator at that time, the conversations that we were having were like around artist-run centers and precarious labor, and I think the show was called Working Conditions. So it came out, he wanted me to do something kind of specific for that, so the idea came out in relation to that, which would be very hard to adapt to like anywhere else. They did survive. They're not happy, but they didn't die. And I like when I did this, I didn't know what was going to happen, if they were going to die in a week or what. But yeah, they did fairly well, which I thought it was kind of like nice. It's kind of like they were growing in less than optimal conditions, which is kind of like Costa Rica. It's kind of like growing in less than optimal conditions. It's kind of like doing okay, like Costa Rica. It's just like, yeah, getting by. But yeah, because even the lighting, like the only lighting is the fluorescent lights, which is like fairly white light. So it was closer to sunlight more than halogen or something. But yeah, definitely not the sun and not the tropical sun either. I think at first I would say that it has to do more with ideas of engagement or like ideas of presenting something that would draw somebody into a space. Like I feel like it's hard for artists because we compete with many visual things and many things that are like, drawing people's attentions. So it's hard to be like a visual communicator in today, I feel, much more than it would have been like 50, 60 years ago, possibly. So I think it's just like kind of like a methodology that I do to like draw somebody in. On the other hand, it's like a way of filling spaces because I'm interested in exhibitions that are kind of like environments or they're like rooms, often with their own logic and their own kind of like system. So color painting walls and painting whole walls allows me to do that. Allows me to like change the room into a specific environment or setup. At times it was like a technical, well, not a technical thing. It was like a conceptual thing in terms of like I didn't want anything else to be referenced at that specific time, but those 3 things. It was also a way of connecting that room to the other room, because he had the same kind of green that the furniture was painted, that the furniture, I designed the furniture to, that kind of escalating shelves, that paradise green paint. So it was a way of connecting the two rooms as well. But yeah, there's times that there's 4 and there's times that there's only 3. And it had to just like, I didn't have anything else that I wanted to go with those 3 videos. No, the curator for that show, he did try that. He passed away in a tragic accident, but he had this like massive collection of books, and part of it was at the gallery in his office. And then he did that, I think at the last day of the show or something. And I have a picture somewhere that he sent me where he tried that. It was mostly art books, which is, I mean, a little bit kind of like biased because they tend to be fairly thick and big. But I'd be interested, yeah, like, you know, if you reshelve, like if you shelve history, you know, how is it going to break up the system that history is organized by a musical score? And then I had an idea at one point after that, which I never made, but if there's any musicians here that want to collaborate in making a musical score out of existing books in a library, out of the way that the books are already organized, I'll be down for that. Anybody else?